started. My name is Eddie Ferguson. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity for Ocean Infinity, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Joe O'Donnell. He is a General Manager at Cielo. Is that how you, yeah, Cielo, okay. He is, I always like to start out with veteran status. So he's a Coast Guard veteran, which is really cool. I'm Air Force myself, so we'll throw some jokes back and forth later. Anyway, he's had several senior management positions over his 30-plus years in cybersecurity. Do they have computers back then? Modems. Okay, gotcha. Cool. He's built programs, teams, lines of business at many market leaders such as Cisco Systems, Nortel, Palo Alto Networks, and now at Cielo. Thank you. Sorry. Over the years, he's teamed with incredible co-workers to build out some of the most impactful new product introductions and corresponding go-to-markets, to include one of the first industrial cyber GTMs, not to mention the groundbreaking Industrial 4.0 momentum happening today at Cielo. And you've also done some MPI leadership experience, and you're a 4-time CRN channel chief. It's very cool. Very super excited to hear from you.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate that. So we got a lot to compete with today. There's another session over there with some guys I wanted to go see. So literally there's a Sistrunk and my peer Kevin are over there today. But we'll get through today, and the goal is to literally maybe give you some food for thought on where to start, some impactful programs that can mature your security levels a little bit more than you currently have, starting with identity, combining it with connectivity. So that's really the goal, is to say at the end we'll show you where we can start. Quick question here before I get started. Audience-wise, show of hands. How many folks are in IT, security, networking, OT? Matthew, I know you can raise your hand on OT. So we got a good mix, right? That's what's really good about this show, is there's a healthy mix. I think it's based on the Houston demographics, that we've got a lot of people in IT and OT at the same company. And we're seeing this really, really interesting convergence around IT tool sets in industrial spaces, as well as OT methodologies back over to some of the critical things in IT. So it's a really neat, and I'm going to touch a little bit on that today, on why things are different, and then go into a little bit of 4.0. There's a little bit of argument that it's already at 5.0, right? It just keeps moving to the right, where people want more telemetry, more data, more AI from assets, OT systems, process control networks, to make better business decisions on. That's why I'll focus a little bit on that. That's pretty brief. Go into a little bit what's different these days, and then ultimately talk a little bit more, maybe get some interchanges going around what you're seeing with your peers of IT and OT collaborations, and maybe the downsides and upsides, and maybe you can share amongst yourselves some of the successes and challenges, because that's what these shows are about, right? So, real quick about Cielo. I still say it wrong, Eddie, so don't worry about it. Cielo, we're based in Tel Aviv. We've got some people over there now that we're thinking about pretty deeply, and about 100 strong. And we looked at the market around zero trust and least privilege, and we called bullshit on it, to be honest with you, right? Where how can you trust a vendor that has your credentials, your keys, your passwords, and things like that? So we've created a solution set that connects trusted, verified individuals to applications, not users to network. We'll touch on that a little bit, but that just sets us apart from all the other things you hear around access, zero trust, and things like that. We've got a really unique architecture, and a lot of these logos here have validated our go-to-market, our religion around, hackers, nation states, and traders don't break and they log in, because a lot of your vendors, a lot of the cloud providers have your credentials. They have to have your credentials, keys, and all those things to get their security techniques finished. We raised about $85 million to date just for this cause, right, to get out and show that identity-based connectivity to application is a real endeavor. IBM, Fortinet are big partners. We have many more, but those kind of stick out. And we're really happy to be at this show. First of all, again, people say, hey, your connectivity, you're doing remote access, there's privileged access out there, how are you different? What we've done is we've taken the control plane and the data plane and split them up and giving the client the control plane back. So all your keys, your credentials, your passwords, your policies, your vault, they remain in your trust enclave or your boundary. And we just use the cloud, any cloud, private or public, to route. And that's how we connect applications to verified identities, right? Again, not users to networks. And we've created a really interesting idea on how this is, an execution on how this is impacting business, right? We're connecting people directly to applications, regardless of network vintage or vendor. And we're starting to enable not just access into an asset or a network, right? It's table stakes, a lot of people do it. But we're seeing what they want out of those networks and delivering that to them safely as well. Some of the industry, how many people have been following Industry 4.0, 5.0, whether you like it or not? Few hands? It's kind of buzzy, right? But it is happening. And what we're seeing it happening in these industries off to the left, right? We spend a lot of our time in oil gas. Not just because I'm based in Houston or the company's good at, but it's converging power, energy, oil, gas, renewables. It's all kind of converging, and we're seeing a really big pull on there. All different kinds of manufacturing, right? We see a lot of food, beverage, ag. They have a lot of funding, and they're really starting to step up their cyber efforts. And more importantly, get the data out about what the telemetry and the assets are doing. Transportation, buildings and cities, military and defense, and a lot of these are making up this big pool of Industry 4.0. And if you look back at the dependencies on the 4 industrial revolutions, right? You had the first one, no steam power, no rail systems, right? Second one, no reliable energy, no mass production. Third one, automations, would not have happened without computer and electronics. And today, the cyber physical systems, right, that connect the hardware and software that interacts with physical things. Without connectivity, I'll touch on the 2 different types of connectivity we're talking about here in a second. Without the connectivity, the 4th one won't start, or it won't complete, or it won't move itself onto the 5th revolution. So who's connecting? How many folks in here are in one of these, different segments? Industrials, life sciences, aero? Show of hands. Handful. How about building management or anything like that? We're seeing a big uptick in that. And I was sitting there with our executives and talking about in an OT endeavor about how to go to market, and some were thinking that's a lifestyle business, that's small. Over 200, it's actually 283 of the Fortune 500s make their money off industrial automation technologies, right? Who would have think Walmart and Amazon are OT customers? Yeah, 2 of the biggest, right? Apple, all their factories, right? 18 of the world's top 20 revenue-generating companies make their money off OT. So, again, I say this, you might already know it, but there's a lot of people out there that think, the smaller tap span ports and all these other things that are in the networks as a lifestyle business. It's big, and it's only getting bigger. Where we play, and what I'm talking about today about starting a project, this slide, who follows SANS? A lot of people here do that. I just scraped it from there. No big deal. I'd rather have them proclaim about what we do than me do it. But the secure remote access component, it's been around for a while. Like 2014, 2015, you see things like Next9, you'll see things like bespoke firewall rules, jump boxes, and things like that to get into, maybe to do some patch, maybe do some AV, WSUS, maybe some DCS, delayed DCS patches and things like that, but mostly piercing in where it's convenient and safe to deliver something. Now it's a whole different ballgame. These other 4 tenants, or controls as SANS and others would call them, are now dependent upon the 2-way in and out of access into isolated networks, right? So we've picked our bailiwick in the remote access piece, not just to get in, but to get things safely out as well. Why? So incident response can be better, faster, more resilient. Same thing with architectures. Visibility and monitoring. We partner with some of the best visibility monitoring tools on the planet. We get them deeper into the asset where they can get more information out. And same thing with risk and vulnerability, all those tool sets. So secure remote access might look like it's number 4, but we've got an opinion where it makes all the other 4 controls better. So this was always a loaded. I did this at ManuSec last week, and it went over like a lead balloon because it really wasn't. It wasn't a lot of response from people that were pre-pandemic in OT versus OT today. We had a lot of newer folks there, but and you don't have to disclose if you don't want to. We can move on if there's not a lot of answers. But did you relax your process control network policies, during the pandemic to keep the asset running? You couldn't put people on site. Anybody have that experience? And that wants to admit it? Because most people don't want to admit it, though. Somebody said pulled out and dust off an old VPN to connect to the process control network because no one could go on site, or they couldn't turn the gas asset off. So there won't be any other answers to that question because no one participated, so we'll move on. But it gives you an idea. There was pre-pandemic, there was activities. Post-pandemic, a lot of people said, hey, I tried something new. I had to keep the asset running. I couldn't turn a turbine down overnight. It took about 4 days. So I used the VPN connection, and you know what? I didn't get hurt. Nothing happened. So I kind of liked it, right? And so post-pandemic, they like the fact that they can be more responsive. They can amortize employees' skill sets and contractors over multiple sites, right? So instead of having a DCS technician in the middle of Mississippi at a paper pulp plant, she can now be amortized over 10 pulp plants. Sir?
So my mom is a dispatcher for a power delivery co-op up in the Midwest, and their dispatching team work from home. Go home, the linemen and stuff like that will still be coming in the shop and stuff like that. They had to do a hard shift to being able to shut down power and all that stuff from remote workstations, cellular networks, all that kind of stuff. But their dispatching team absolutely loves it because she's like, if her husband's going on a hunting trip down in Missouri or something like that, she's like, I just sit at the cabin, wait for the call to roll in, and click, 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 and the power goes off there until the lineman tells me it's back on, and it's great. I know their IT manager, and I was talking to him, and he was like, it was a nightmare for about a week and a half. He's like, and then everything was great.
Good. So good. Last 2 weeks, great answer. We'll take it. Now, seriously, there's habits and things that we have all learned through that experience, and having remote functionality and remote response, it kind of dusted off the old, hey, I'll connect in, and now there's a whole group of great companies, providing access securely. We might all argue how you do it, right? We might have better nerd knobs than the next person, vice versa, but there's a whole group of companies now focused on getting workers, contractors safely in and out of assets that they wouldn't have thought about before the pandemic. So thank you for that answer. Appreciate that. The other thing that's happened since of late, I wouldn't say the pandemic did it or anything like that, but we have to address all three different kinds of architectures under the same company in many cases. There are some aspects of a company, especially if you're looking at OT and IT convergence, where they're connected to the cloud. There's just no going back. They've refactored, shifted, and lifted everything they can, and they're enjoying that experience. That same company could have assets and subsidiaries in the same in the nearby networks where they're cloud averse. They do things because they have to. Maybe they shift and lift an application. Maybe they might do it begrudgingly, but they'll do it anyway. And then there's offline, right? Which, again, 283 out of the Fortune 500 plus a whole bunch of others, make money offline. You can argue if it's truly offline, right? But offline capabilities and assets. So now how do you address the identity, the security, maturity, and connectivity across all those three environments? As you're looking at your projects, I have a list of where to start toward the end, but take this into consideration and do a mental inventory of what does your enterprise look like. Does anybody represent all three here in your environment? A couple? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty common. One could always argue that if you have a modem line, you're not offline. I can get in. I can still get in, right? And then if I'm charging your phone, I can get in, right? So the offline air gap thing is somewhat of it's just a directional term these days. Nothing's really totally offline, but you get the gist of things of the different environments. And it's a challenge, right? Because a lot of these will have cloud connected, might have all new web-based applications, which are easy to address, especially if you're looking at agentless type solutions. But it gets really tough when you're dealing with 1980s, 1990s, password username type applications. Right? You've got to really do a really strong inventory to create a program that goes across the entire estate, not just the easy stuff. So from a TAC perspective, there's three things that, this is oversimplifying it, right? But it kind of goes back to the hackers, nation states, and traders don't break in, they log in, because all they really need is visibility of an application from the internet, and it's easy to make a mistake. We were doing an RDP scan of a very strong security posture company, and they had 12 RDP servers open to the internet. And again, even the best can leave holes. So it's not that difficult to find applications that are visible from the internet. Credentials. If you have a cloud provider, maybe it's a cloud security provider, that doesn't have an architecture where your credentials and your access management are in your possession, your trust boundary, they have your keys. They have your encryption, they have your policies, why they need to get it into their cloud, decrypt, look inside, make their sausage from their security technique standpoint, pack it back up and send it on its way. Guess what? You're in one of their 170 POPs. So, and you've seen the news, 80, 60 something percent of the breaches emanate from credential theft, right? Your credentials, and that's one of the things that I'll close on is, one of the steps is ask your vendors, where are your credentials? And then also the ability to roam the network. If I have a user connected to a network, my ability to roam that network is a lot easier than a verified person accessing a specific initial application based on policy. So these are the three things that you need for a successful road attack. And this isn't exclusive to OT, by the way. Is anywhere you go. And so what you need to do is put together a set of policies and or constraints where you can look at the control points. You've got access controls. Think about that door, the picture of the door on the last slide. Your access controls, connectivity controls, like I'm in the house, right? Access controls. Connectivity controls, I'm allowed to use the kitchen and the living room, but not the bathroom, right? And then oversight control, I can see what you're doing inside my house. So some of the things on access control, right? Multi-factor authentication seems like a no-brainer, yet only 38% of enterprises have used multi-factor authentication. It's not a silver bullet either. There's 12 different ways to hack multi-factor authentication. So it all depends based on your architecture, your controls and things. But these are simple access controls that you can look into your IT and OT departments to see if they're checking the box on it and if they're using it. Single sign-on and passwordless experiences. People are not going to use new techniques. What do engineers do when we are confronted with a new tool? We'll engineer around it, right? We'll go around it. So if it's not easy to use, and the one big thing that we see is the federation of identities, right? There's a lot of things around people like Okta or Duo, or why not use both, right? So federation, looking at federation of identity providers is also key on the access control piece. It gets a little stickier when you're looking at cloud, hybrid, and isolated. There's certain things you can't do in isolated. You can't go to the internet and get SAML, right, and get MFA. There's techniques that companies like ourselves have created that you actually can get a single sign-on, fully authenticated experience inside of an isolated network. Connectivity controls. Key here is constant authorization. Some people will hit the beach, boom, okay, you're in, and then they have no visibility to control what you're doing while you're inside the house. Right? It's key to understand that you need to have control and visibility of when the person's in the house, can I give them pinpoint access? You can only use that cupboard. What controls around identity and brokerage do you have? Do I have to use the on-site Active Directory? Can I use Azure? Can I use all three? And what are those permissions? And then if I don't like something, do I have the capability of terminating? right? Like you mentioned, the dispatch center on mobile from the cabin, right? You got mobile, you can actually literally watch the person inside the application, what they're doing, record it, and if you don't like it, you can terminate it. You have to have some people just let them in and they don't verify termination. And then you wonder why dwell time and other thing is pretty high, right? So the last one, oversight control. This is more of a privilege access management type section where, you know, you want things supervised, you want them recorded. We've developed this in a way, and we encourage customers to use this kind of functionality for learning, especially in OT. All the kids want to go work at Google. They don't want to work at a paper pulp plant in the middle of Mississippi where there's no schools, right? So we developed it for supervising from a safety and security perspective, but what we found is they've been teaching new control system and interns with, you know, people that have been doing asset management and, you know, control systems and PLCs for decades, having them ride shotgun virtually with a recording tool, teaching them how that asset actually works inside of an older plant or a newer plant. It's just a nice byproduct that we've experienced as a company. So those are the three areas. Again, the door, what they can do inside the house, and then supervisory controls to make sure. And these are available in general terms from a lot of vendors. Right, we typically try to think we do it better, but there's big rocks in here that you can put into your maturity program, and you can kind of check them off to see which solution's the best for you. And again, it's all trying to build toward, can I have a successful project in OT? Can I pull in IT, and can we collaborate to get the project done? And having these kind of framed out, I think a lot of your IT brethren, if you're OT, will appreciate the fact that you're looking at these things, and then possibly, you know, have lessons learned where these IT tools have been in use for a while, and then your OT people can give the IT folks the visibility of actually how it actually works inside of a safe environment. Because there is availability and safety on one side, right? And that sometimes some IT folks don't get the benefit of a partner inside of their business to help them out with how that asset actually works. The other piece I would recommend is converge as many techniques as possible into the user experience, right? I mentioned multi-factor authentication, credential access management, right? Identity providers. All these things can be moved into a single tool, right? So when you're retrofitting an older asset or even on the enterprise side, ease of use is key. If they have to log in 9 times, they're not going to use it. We had a customer that now they log in once, and they're like, we had to log into those systems 9 times before we even got access. It's a common thing. It's not not too wild of a story. But if you can converge a bunch of uses and security tool sets into one user experience in all those environments, connected, averse, and isolated, I think your project will go over pretty well. The other aspect of things is that if you can converge your tool sets into one user experience, the amount of money that you'll save is immense, right? And when you do your projects, there's how many stakeholders typically? It's not just 1 or 2, or it's usually, I think the average now from Gartner, it's 17 to 27 stakeholders actually touch a major project, right? It might just be okay, it might just be a blocker, like they're saying, no, I don't want to do this, or I want somebody else. It might be the person doing the concept, it might be the executive buyer, what have you, but they all can understand one thing: cost takeout, right? So set aside all the technical jargon and everything, but if you're looking at collapsing those use cases and those applications into an easy-to-use tool, you might have to use 2 tools or 3 tools or 1, it depends, right? But make a good stab at making the user experience a little bit more delightful and easy to use, and at the same time, you're going to shrink the attack surface, and you're going to save a lot of money. And again, everybody in the stakeholder pool can understand cost takeout. So a couple steps here. And this is kind of a no-brainer, but people, when you're on multiple teams and you have different aspects of the business to be responsible for, what we typically try to tell people to find out is, you know, where can we find the fragmented access and identities multiple older systems, maybe jump host, VPN, bespoke firewall rules, even some new technologies that are pretty weak that have limited or no audit trail. They let the people in, and there's no post-access control whatsoever. How many people, and you don't have to admit this either, know your employees that use shared credentials? I know it's a big no-no, but I see a few heads shaking, but in the industrial space, it's not the best practice, but the cost of seats of licenses for control systems and PLCs and other things is pretty expensive. And so there's a lot of habits out there that it's operator 1. From 4 to 8s, and the 8s to 12, it's operator 1, but it wasn't John, it was Bill. But how do I know that, right? So try to find out where there's generic accounts and shared credentials, and start really peeling back the risk of that. There's ways to identify and decompose shared credentials into a unique identity. We could talk about that at a later date, but just areas to pick apart are really look hard at the generic accounts. Like I ran across a Windows super user. They use shared accounts, right? Is that insane? But it happened. So, and same thing on the industrial side. Using shared accounts, legacy, it's plastered right on the workshop window. So when the next operator comes in, the password's right there. Right? Look for areas like that, and try to start there. Take all those attributes and point them at your biggest risk. How many folks do business in China? One. Russia, if you're in coal, you're still talking to Russia, like it or not, right? Or even in the military with, traders, right? There's still areas of high risk. It doesn't have to be a big project. It could be one connection to somewhere that you have to do business with, but it keeps you up at night. Start there. It's a win, right? And then look at the overall remote access program, right? Get a win on the board for you and your team. Take and look at the highest risk access first, and then look at the big picture of remote access. Are we using it just to get in? Why? Are we using it to get out? Great. How do we do that, right? And then look at the whole internet and industry of things. Right, I bring up Industry 4.0 because it's a little bit of kind of a tail wagging the dog, right? We want this device-device, real-time connectivity, and we still haven't figured out the human-to-machine connectivity, right? Let's take a step back, define your highest risk access, because you'll have no credibility if you don't knock the first one down. You'll get a lot of connectivity or credibility if you can nail that first one. Then look at remote access as a program. And again, it's not something you can do overnight. And then at that point, when you have your highest risk covered, your remote access, solid program, then you can look at the whole, Internet of Things and devices to devices and a more robust human experience to devices. The other piece is that we've seen projects succeed and fail based on collaboration between OT and IT. There's some go good, some get submarined, some have selfless motivation, but we try to spend most of our time on those ones that are doing well together. And we learn a lot as a company from that, and our clients and our partners learn a lot when we try to play the UN, or sometimes Dr. Phil, right, getting the groups together. But we find out that when both teams are on board, that the projects move forward. There's one guy in here, and I won't mention, who's got a really good team that does that now, where the lines are really blurred. They know their jobs and they know what they have to do, but they have a really great leader and a great team aspect where you can tell them apart by where they are physically, but if you're on a call with them, it looks like one cohesive IT and OT team. And if you can get to that place, your projects will definitely move a lot quicker. So kind of wrapping it up here with this before we get to some questions. And again, you can make your own checklist, but number one, vendors, network, software, connectivity providers. Where are my credentials? It's a hard question to ask them, and the one thing I would lead up with is, can you establish yourself as a user in my network? Sometimes they come back to you like a dog went to get the paper at the curb and said, here, I do, I can. Wrong answer, right? you want one that they can't, that means they have your credentials, basically. If they can do that, they have your credentials. So you want a vendor that can say, hey, no, you have control of your credentials unless you give me access. And then you've got a good starting point there, right? Identify your highest risk, like in the last slide. Right? Start with a winnable fight. Anybody have any examples of one thing that can keep them up at night from a connectivity standpoint? Sir?
So on that pen test, I found all their inclinometers. Basically, they control how fast a train goes when either going up a hill or down a hill. And we found that those are actually managed by a third-party vendor. And so customer didn't know what those creds are. Obviously, on a pen test, my job is to see what I can cause an impact. And on that login banner page for those devices, there was a support number. So I'm like, interesting. So I called that support number, and I just mocked up like, hey, I'm testing or troubleshooting connectivity to these devices. Can you help me out? They didn't verify who I worked for, and they're the vendor helping me save lives. So ultimately, I got root access not only on that device, but every inclinometer in the whole environment, because it's a standard schema that they use. Granted, the passwords are unique, but it's not hard to reverse engineer things. So it was pretty revealing that, sure, you don't know the creds, so you think you're safe, but how are your vendors managing your creds? And those are the ones that often get overlooked most. And I'd also add another point is, don't ask the vendors whether or not they have access. Verify the people accessing are the ones you're expecting to access. Because I also spent a lot of time in aerospace, and vendors coming in would often outsource to other companies we didn't know about until we started turning on geocaching. Like, the company was based out of the UK, but we had people connecting from Taiwan, and that's a big no-no.
So Aaron's going to take the rest of the presentation over by now. That was really good. Thanks, Aaron. Any others now that he broke the ice? That was good, huh? Get the human and application connectivity done right. Why should a certain individual or identity have access to applications, right? Ask the question. It's not like you get everything you want, right? If there's a user that is only allowed Microsoft Paint, well, only give them Microsoft Paint. You can now do that these days, right? I'm being a little facetious, but still. You can nail it down into certain applications that they're allowed to have for a certain period of time in a geolocation, based on their device posture, based on time of day. All these different attributes, you can nail these postures down into where they have application access to only what they're allowed. It is zero trust, it is least privilege, absolutely. So get the identity correct for humans to an application. And then when you're looking at some next gen or 4.0 type use cases, your device to device policies will be much stronger because of that. Establish strong controls, the door, the window and such. Access, connectivity, and supervisory controls. Make sure that you've got each one of those covered properly. I would stress on the access side, verified identities to application. On the connectivity control side, I would strongly recommend continuous authorization in the tools that you use. And on the supervisory piece, I would stress recording and the ability to terminate from anywhere. And then lastly, from a project's perspective, it's got to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, they'll circumvent it. And especially in OT, they're smart. They're going to figure it out. We've all seen that movie. But it's interesting because it shrinks your attack surface at the same time it saves you a lot of money. And again, everybody can recognize cost takeout. And that's something that IT and OT can bond over, is that cost takeout, right? And again, the unique thing about this show, and last week at ManuSec was really interesting. There was a lot more IT folks at ManuSec than last year. And I think people are realizing that both sides have a lot of good stuff to give the other. And from a collaboration standpoint, they owe it to the business on both sides. So we're getting a lot of requests from CISOs, CIOs, and others. Can you help us with our plan? And it's just literally to start somewhere. It doesn't have to be a big monster project, but If you can nail the identity project with the connectivity project, it's a big win for both sides. This is one of our clients, Mondelez. They make Oreos and all kinds of other stuff that I shouldn't eat. Look for a tool that IT and OT can agree on. It could be any tool, not just us. Any tool that you both can agree on, and attack that project in a way that you can collaborate. It's interesting to see the teams that have grown over the past 5 years rally around doing joint projects together from IT and OT. It's night and day from the ones that are oil and vinegar. So, and then again, that's what I had. I can open it up for some questions. More importantly, if you have peers in the room that you want to talk to, ask each other questions, because you got a vast array of experiences here. Any questions, sir? You got anything, Jeff? No? So we take them as a initial application, right? So what our tool and other tools can do for you is they can create a connective tissue from the user authorized to FactoryTalk, right? It could be a legacy application. It could be a web-based application. That's one thing to look for if you're looking at FactoryTalk, maybe Experian and some other things. Find out if it's a web-based use case or if it's a legacy use case. Legacy use cases, you need an agent. Web-based use cases, most times you don't need an agent, right? In that scenario, maybe with RS Logix, we have scenarios where a Rockwell technician is off-site, there's a support contract, they will not allow any agent from a vendor or the customer to be put on that technician's laptop. So how do they get in? How do you secure that? How do you monitor it? You can't. So what we've developed is an ephemeral SSH method where they will send a request for an application by clicking a tile. We will send them an ephemeral SSH string. They click that. It's a passwordless credential experience. Now they're into the FactoryTalk or RS Logix with a legacy application on a laptop versus a $5,000 truck roll. So, same thing. Ignition's a little bit easier to deal with because it's web-based. So, great. Thanks, Ed. I'm not holding you from happy hour or dinner. We've still got some time. No, but there's good. Aaron, thanks for the questions. Thanks for the questions, too. Anything else, and we'll wrap it up here. Good deal. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.